She married him to bear his heir, and this is where the story begins. Pelias, the Grand Duke of the far north of the empire. And here was a girl sitting by the window, telling and saying, "I got married here today, and the owner of this place is the Grand Duke Barras Pelias, a war hero respected by everyone, and at the same time, he is the killer who is feared by everyone, and he buried his father, who died in battle with his own hands at the age of 9. And beside his father's killer, for 2 years, he pretended to be a war orphan and hosted the horse groom. And finally, when Barras gained the man's trust, he succeeded in taking revenge. And he was criticized for being dishonorable, but he didn't care. And Barras lived on the battlefield for 16 years. He also led all the empire's wars to victory, but he had one problem: that when the full moon comes, he commits a brutal massacre, without giving any consideration to friend or foe. And so Barras earned 2 names, war hero and killer. And I am Celine Pelias. I married that killer man today, and with princesses and nobles who would queue up to marry him if he sent them a marriage proposal. Why did he choose Celine, who has no family and all she owns is her name? Is it because of her unparalleled beauty? And here he pulled her tightly towards him and looked at her in fear so much that she was about to cry from fear. Or is it love at first sight? No, this killer cannot feel that. Even if I lost contact with Barras suddenly, this is what he wants: a woman who doesn't ask even if he doesn't come home. Because today, after the first night, Barras plans to imprison the Duchess in the room for the rest of her life. And here she explains to us how she knew what would happen to her with her saying, "How can I know that?" That's because all of that happened in the novel I was reading. Of all the romantic novels out there, isn't that too much? This is ridiculous. Even my day, when a friend came to her and said to her, "Are you reading a novel again? They say they've started reading the script now." And she's okay. I was going to stop reading it anyway because it wasn't interesting. And the girlfriend, "What kind of novels are they?" And she's, "It's just garbage." And here her friend said, "It seems you don't like this type." And she laughed and said, "So I didn't finish reading it." And here she means the novel that embodied the character of the heroine. So she said in tension, "Of course, even if I read it to the end, maybe it won't help me at all because I won't even be able to get out of my bedroom after today." And here she felt frustrated and said, "And unfortunately, when I came to my senses, the wedding was already over, and I was waiting for Barras in the room." And here she fell on the bed and said, "There's also a snowstorm outside. No money or knowledge of the geography of this place." Then she said in tension, "And on top of all that, the owner of this body is beautiful but very thin." And here she remembered how she was saying, "Even when I didn't have money, I ate seaweed for a week. I was stronger than this body." And here she felt sleepy. She said, "I'm in a big mess. I'm sleepy. And if I don't escape today, I'll be stuck in this prison for life." And suddenly Barras came in and started looking at her, and here Celine noticed his presence. And she got up and said, "Did Barras enter the bedroom?" And here she looked at him and continued saying to herself, "I used to call him the Monster Duke. Is he really scary in reality?" And here he was looking at her while she was saying to herself, "He's huge." And here he said to her, "What are you doing?" And here she said to herself, "He doesn't look very scary, does he?" Then she said to him, "I'm sorry, I was asleep." And in tension she said to him, "I'll get out of here quickly." Here he was looking at her in a frightening way, and she was trying to get up from the bed. She said to herself, "It will be difficult to escape since this man has entered the bedroom." But Paris put the lamp down and said to her, "Go to sleep." And when she tried to object and said to him, But, he said to her, "Sleep." And she did it immediately. Then she said to herself, "Although he looks a bit scary, isn't he handsome enough? He looks like a bear, that he is cute. Why did I almost faint when I read about him in the original novel? I don't know. Since I lay on the bed now feeling sleepy and fell asleep, and here Paris was looking at her in silence, and suddenly he clenched his fist in anger. Then he looked at her with a frightening look. And in a new morning she woke up and got up, and when she put her hand on the bed, She started saying, I can't feel any warmth at all. Did Paris sleep somewhere else? And she got up and took her ease on the other side, saying, he might be a bit lonely. But aren't we a couple? Why are we sleeping apart? But she didn't know that he was sitting in front of her, looking at her. And here, when she noticed him, she looked at him in tension and said, oh my God, there he is. And here he looked at her with his frightening eyes, but she saw him in a different way as she felt amazed and said to herself that he is more handsome in the light. Then she said to him, since you weren't there, I thought you were somewhere else. Okay? And suddenly she was shocked and felt embarrassed and got under the bed. And she felt embarrassed and said to herself, what should I do? I became his wife. I already got married. I became this man's wife. At this time, Paris was also saying to himself, I got married yesterday. Most people get scared when they see me and can't make eye contact with me. Even my subordinates have a bad impression of me, so it's impossible for me to have a normal marriage. However, I married a one-eyed man, nicknamed the War Demon Poor Woman, and here he remembered her look at him as he said, but yesterday, not now. She laughed and said to me, since you weren't there, I thought you were somewhere else. And here he asked himself and said, is she not afraid of me? She sees me as an ordinary man. And here he thought for a while, and then sighed and said, this cannot be possible. Then he got up and looked at her and said to himself, it's useless delusions. And here Celine said to herself when she felt his footstep, I think he went out. And she got up quickly and said, I think he left so I can change my clothes right. Then she went and opened the closet and said, but he is nice and not like what was said about him in the novel. And here she thought and say to herself, could he possibly do this suddenly? Something like that? He wouldn't do it, right? Then she chose a dress, but she didn't know how to wear it. So she looked at him and said, but how do I wear this? I should have read a lot about this novel. After a while, Barras arrived. She was wearing the dress, but it needed to be tied at the back. However, he ignored her. At that moment, she looked at him as he went to the bed and poured blood on it. She fell to the ground in fear, saying to herself, blood. Then she went away, imagining things. And in shock, she said, what? What? Is he going to summon a demon? There was nothing about blood in the novel. Was it a horror novel? Who is the victim? Could it be me? Barras offers his hand to Celine, saying, the floor is cold. Take my hand. Celine takes his hand and says shyly, thank you. Barras offers to help Celine with her clothes, and she says, oh, yes. Celine thinks to herself, it's big and thick. So these are men's hands. He's a bit like a bear, and charming. While Celine is feeling comfortable, Barras looks at her in shock and thinks to himself, wait a minute. She's small and white and she's thin too. If I touch her, I feel like she might break. Barras feels tense and doesn't know what to do. When Celine looks at him, he tightens the ribbon. The maid, Anna, arrives and says, I'll help Her Grace the Duchess prepare. Celine goes to Anna and says, oh, thank you. Celine's thoughts. Barras was looking at me angrily. He was thinking to himself, I feel empty without her. If I could just close this door, she wouldn't escape me like this, would she? While Anna was helping her, Anna told me to prepare a meal for the Archduke, and then she left the room with him. They've both left. I think I can still smell the blood. I need to air out the room. I went to the window and opened it. Suddenly I felt sad and said to myself, I got through last night safely without any incidents, but I remembered what happened to Celine in the novel. She said, originally, Celine lost consciousness before her first night and was imprisoned. Barras lived in the Grand Duchess's room after announcing his retirement to focus on farming. He paid no attention to the plight of a 20-year-old girl who was so afraid she couldn't even look into his eyes. A real monster. But it didn't happen to me like it did in the original novel. As in the original work, I wasn't imprisoned immediately. There is no hope in a situation like this. Celine's thoughts. My hands are trembling. If I miss my chance today, I may never have another chance to escape. But going out into the snow without any preparation is like going to my death. Barras's actions. He knocks on the door and says, I'm coming in. When he doesn't get a response, he enters the room and finds Celine looking out the window. Baras's thoughts. Doesn't she feel cold? I heard she came from the warm southwest of the country. Baras's actions. He approaches Celine and says, or maybe, do you like the cold weather here? Celine's action. She hears his footsteps and turns to look at him. Baras's thoughts. It's scary to feel so overwhelmed just by making eye contact. But this face looking at me is exactly my type. Baras's actions. He says to Celine, you haven't eaten anything, have you? Aren't you hungry? Baras's thoughts. My guess was right. She's looking at me without fear. While Celine was looking at him, she imagined him as a lion and herself as a rabbit. She said to him, if you're hungry, can I get you some grass? She tried to suppress a laugh and said to herself, I shouldn't laugh. Baras looked at her and thought to himself, was she going to laugh? He remembered something and said, it seems that Celine likes to be asked if she's hungry. If you'll allow me, I'd like to apologize here to Her Grace the Archduke. He remembered how they used to be afraid of him and said, His Grace the Archduke has been on the battlefield since he was young and has never had the opportunity to meet women. Baras's speech. Although you attended some of the victory parties hosted by the imperial family, no woman ever came to talk to His Highness. And if there was any eye contact, they would feel terrified and quickly turn away. Therefore, you were just an object of fear, and His Highness the Archduke never spoke to a woman. Ever. Celine's thoughts. I want to go out. But I suddenly remembered that I shouldn't do that. I said that because I was in a bad mood. What should I do if he imprisons me immediately because of my arrogance? It's impossible that he will let me leave. I don't want to be imprisoned again after I just felt a little bit of freedom. Baras surprised her by offering his hand. She said, yes? And Baras said to her, you need to get up if you want to go out. She followed him, thinking to herself, do I have to wear these things? It's hard to walk in them. But it's nice to take care of my clothes and coordinate them. Celine's thoughts. When Baras turned to look at her, she was shocked and thought to herself, I'm so slow. Is he telling me to walk faster? However, Paris offered her his arm. At this point, she looked at him silently, her mind racing in disbelief. Is he asking me to hold his arm? She thought to herself. No, he can't mean that, right? He's just folding his elbows, I guess. I think I'll just stay still. Paris looked at her in silence, and she thought to herself, I'm so nervous. Suddenly, she remembered the words of his assistant, Yarthain Orgus, who had told him, when a woman is wearing uncomfortable clothing, it is polite to offer her your arm. And here he was angry because he thought she had rejected him. And he remembered the assistant's words when he said to him, therefore, unless you are someone she hates to the point of death, she will not refuse your company. So he grabbed her hand in anger and said to himself, I cannot say that there is any affection between us, but Celine and I are now a couple. And unlike the others, she was not afraid of me. And here I turn to the other side, and he says, what is this nonsense? A woman was brought here for one purpose only, which is to have children. Anyway, I don't know why I treat her like this. All I have to do is lock her up.